last time we were on China Talk, all of us were very hyped. There was a lot going on in our lives, lots of sleep deprivation, lots of internet issues. 2 of those remain, but still a congratulations to Kenobi and Vowels for getting through their exams. That's exciting.
Finally, it's over.
Almost done.
It's finally over.
Yeah.
Even though I will have to go back at some point, I'm done with this part of the journey. But oh boy,
Yeah,
did it feel good.
we've both just finished 3 out of 4 years, so we aren't quite there yet. But
I don't miss it.
the finish line is in sight.
It's it, yeah.
Exactly.
I see the finish line. It is there. It's just very far away.
It feels like it gets further away each year, and then
The
it just
closer
sneaks
you
up on
get, the farther away it goes.
Exactly. Like I was telling you guys beforehand, I have my first vacation in like my professional life coming up in 10 days.
What's your plans? What are you planning on doing?
I'm seeing my family in South Carolina. My mom's boss has like a home on the beach that he lets us use. So like every year since I was little, we just go to the beach and
That sounds great.
escape
The hustle
my
and
gosh.
bustle.
I'm so ready. I'm so ready, guys. Like, my family's also in Disney World right now, just because they're doing all these fun things without me, and the pictures. I have so much envy. But
You're getting
looks so
FOMO.
much fun. I'm getting so much freaking FOMO. Like, oh gosh, it's rough. But what about you, Joe?
What about me? I'm sitting.
I mean, vacation, school. What's up?
Tell us, Joe. What's up?
Yeah, Joe.
School schmool. I got that esports life. Am I right, guys?
You
Who's
got
with me? Yeah, contenders, folks. How's it going? Yeah, woo! Living the life over here.
Can I start reminding us of Chinese contenders now?
You
know who doesn't see the light? LGE.
They don't. Yeah, they don't see the light.
All right. So for those of you who haven't seen China Talk before, last time we were talking about the Pacific Showdown, which took the best of the best from China, Korea, Pacific, and Australian divisions, set them all against each other for spots for the gauntlet. And if I believe, I think I'm correct in saying that we all believe that LGE and Element Mystic would be in the finals.
Yeah.
And we were very worried about the one winner, T1w.
They reversed it on us. It was literally like the team that we thought was going to cost us at all likelihood was going to cost us the spot ended up being the one that saved us, having no China at all at Gauntlet, which would have been worst case scenario.
It turned out Silver3 and Milanman and Micha and Hybe all remembered how to play Overwatch.
For one game, which was the most important game.
But it was at the cost of JMac and Piggy and Haker knowing how to play Overwatch. Yeah. So
it was brutal.
Can't win them all.
There can only be one. At any one given time, there can only be one halfway decent Chinese team.
Well, now there's only one that goes to Gauntlet, so we're gonna hopefully send the best team.
The prophecy is continuing.
Let's hope it's still one actually good team.
Yeah.
It could be the one winner. I mean, that would be fitting.
It could just be T1w. This goes there. And
let's talk though a little bit about. I mean, I don't want to harp too much because I know that it's very saddening to all of us. But what happened? Like, what went wrong? Kenobi, you're grimacing so hard.
So okay, when they played O2, I think we talked about it before, like on the last episode that we talked about, is we favored really their match against Element Mystic being the stylistic matchup that helped them the most. And O2, I believe LG wins control, and then O2 just kind of pretty much ran through the rest of the map against LGE, if I'm not mistaken, the rest of the series. So it was a 3-1, and it was like, okay, it's O2, the Korean teams, the Korean Giants are playing to their strengths and playing to their win conditions a lot. And LGE then plays Talon, and this is where I think everything just crumbles entirely for LGE. And when I see Ash Goats, no matter what Optidox will say, if it's good or not, that is not the win condition of LGE.
It's good. It is good.
Okay, it is good. Okay,
I am an Ash Goats defendant. It is good.
It may be good, but for LGE,
just gotta know what you're doing.
For LGE, their win condition has always been throughout the entirety of Chinese contenders and throughout the entirety that we've seen them is Somber Goats. When they decide to just throw that to the wind, that's really where you start to see them kind of fall apart. And they didn't look happy on stage at all. It looked like they had kind of hit the mental kaboom at that point where they were just trying to figure out what to do. Haker, I think, put out on Weibo that Sombra obviously wasn't working for them, so they were trying to do new things in Ash Goats, but that's really not the time to be doing that. That's it's an elimination game. If you lose this, you go home and you lose your region a spot. So the fact that they switched off of the Sombra Goats there at the end was kind of the nail in the coffin of LGE, and that was really where I think everything kind of fell apart for them, and they ended up getting 3-0'd.
In hindsight, we probably should have guessed that a team that one-trick Sombra Goats wasn't a great matchup into a region which is really good at Sombra Goats. Yeah. But, you know, I feel like there was talk before the showdown of this maybe being Haker's last ride. He was just in it for a bit of a laugh. I want to see how far he could get just one-tricking Sombra. And I feel like this might be it for Haker. I feel like the Lingan we're going to see in a couple of weeks when Contender starts back up is going to be a very different Lingan.
They do play in next in 2 days.
Yeah. Well, we'll see what they do in next, but you do need to go back to the drawing board after that kind of performance at the showdown. There was talk of Haker going away anyway, so I'm very intrigued to see what the new Lingan is going to be.
And then let's kind of make ourselves a little bit happier here. So yes, unfortunately, LGE, because they did place 5th, did lose China a spot in the gauntlet. However, T1w ensured that China would still be represented. So what did T1w do correctly, Volamel?
Well, they didn't feed.
They did.
They didn't take counter picks against themselves. So that's definitely a plus. Outside of just, they did play very well. I think Mulan Run definitely had a very big performance. He was somebody throughout the entire regular season that was pretty quiet. Seeing him on the Sombra, even last season, towards the end of it, it wasn't great. And we saw him in the regular season. It wasn't great. But him on Brigida at the showdown, I think this team steps up when their backs are against the wall. We saw them claw and struggle through playoffs this season, and they made it happen, even though they came in second, right? And I think that speaks to a lot of their kind of fortitude, their kind of stamina, their mental willpower to be able to go through that and deal with that, and then come out the end and improve from it and learn from those lessons. And I always go back to that coaching staff. I can't think of another
Jump Cat and Extra.
Solid. Yeah, I can't think of another solid tier 2 Chinese coaching staff that has done and has the track record they do, and coaches the players that they do and scouts the players that they do. So yeah, I think T1w all in all definitely performed well. They seem to have gotten out of their slump, maybe. I don't know. I haven't seen enough from them yet to say, okay, they're back. They're at their dominant form again. They looked better. I'll say that. I know that this is obvious that they looked better, right?
Especially against like Order and Talon when they played. They had already, I think they 3-0'd Talon in the first round, right? Yep. And when they came back into the lower losers bracket, okay, they beat Order pretty convincingly. And then when they played Talon, they actually played probably the best Goats I've seen them play since probably like season 3 when they were playing Doom Goats. And it wasn't like fantastic. It wasn't like game breaking like San Francisco, Vancouver, but it's the best I've ever seen them play. Micha played Zarya incredibly well, which is something I had very rarely or never had seen before. You mentioned Molan Ren on the Brigitte, also brought up the Sombra a little bit. So I think just as a whole, that team played probably the best it's played in a very, very long time. And I think it kind of, they've played at LAN a lot of times, and I don't know if this is something that LGE didn't have, or like the LAN experience, because T1w has played at Next, they've played at LAN Story Cup, they've played 2 seasons of Chinese Contenders, I believe, at LAN as well. So they definitely have the experience at LAN, and all the eyes were on them. I mean, it was in Shanghai, like you're fighting for your region in your region's home, and if you're LGE on the other side of that coin, you're thinking to yourself, we're like legitimately about to lose our home stadium and lose a China gauntlet spot, and maybe the nerves kind of got to them a little bit, and I think that was the difference between T1w and LGE.
Someone else on T1w I did want to quickly mention was Huya. We now know his name is Huya, not Huya. That was clarified during the showdown. There's sometimes a little bit of confusion.
We had like 3 different variations during showdown.
Yeah, there's like sometimes a little bit of confusion about how some of these Chinese names are pronounced. We've now had confirmation that the flag support for T1w is Huya. he was kind of hyped up in the marketing for the showdown as being this T1w star player to look at. Like every team seemed to have a designated star player, Kaiser, an obvious one for O2, for example.
Sure.
Huya was the choice for T1w in a lot of the marketing, and I thought, okay, he's a decent player. I can see that, sure. I felt like Huya actually really stepped up in that LAN environment. He's been a player who has been, on average, pretty decent, has some clutch moments, steps up when her team needs. And he stepped up all showdown. He was a consistently great performer in that flex support role when T1w needed it. And even when they didn't, even when they were looking really good, it was off the back of Huya putting in great performances. So I think that was a big key to it. It was not only just Milan Man suddenly looking the best he's looked in months, Hybe looking the best he's looked in months, but Huya had some genuinely phenomenal performances. And that's someone else I want to keep an eye on going into the next teams of contenders. Can Huya keep up that form, or is he going to go back to just being the kind of average, consistent Zen we're used to?
Now, I have to bookend this with a little bit of criticism, right?
Of course.
Vowels, talk to me about Illusion.
Can I just go back to talking about the other sport? Can we just keep talking about Huya?
Illusion had... It's so weird, too, because in, like, Illusion as a player from, like, my time covering Chinese contenders has always been a player that comes up at, like, the big moments, right? Like, when he plays against Coldest, when he plays against Mali, these, like, really good Zenyatta players in Chinese contenders, he always comes out on top somehow, is up by, like, 30% in all charge most of the time. And then this, like, Pacific Showdown, where I thought he was going to be the main guy, or one of the main guys on T1w, he just had some really questionable moments on that Zenyatta, where I usually, I'm usually very... safe in saying that he's consistent, he plays it very well, he plays safe, but this time it was just like he maybe transferred all his powers into Huya, and that's what happened. There can only be one T1w support at a time who plays well enough, but yeah, I mean, Vowels, go ahead and just talk to us about it.
I don't know. I feel like T1w is another team that kind of needs to make some changes. We haven't seen really anything out of Assassin when he's come in. Micha is really good at Doomfist, but not great at Zion, not great at much else. I feel like T1w and LG, they were two strongest teams last season. They went to Showdown for a reason, but both of them need to be kind of doing some soul searching, making some big changes, and maybe Illusion on that main sport is another role we see T1w mix up. I think maybe one of the big standouts is maybe you try and get Huya-chan off LGD. I don't see that much working. You maybe try and look through the lower tiers for maybe a standout main support there. I do feel like that's one of the roles T1w should be looking at, though, because you can't really afford to keep having performances like that.
Hey, you can't just have your Lucio just wall riding 20 meters behind your team and sound barriering with 3 people down. Like that's some amateur hour stuff, and that's not going to get you pretty deep at Gauntlet. That's not going to get you your team signed. That's not going to get, eyes looking at your team when you have these glaring weaknesses and you're struggling to get through. Yes, you came out the other end, and you came out with kind of a revitalized energy going through Showdown. But I think just like how I value in how I value iteration in the Overwatch League, I think Contenders needs to break that safety blanket and really start to churn out players and figure out what works for you and what your team wants to be, because that kind of performance can't stick.
Yeah, you just can't have your...
Let's talk...
Yeah. Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, you just can't... There were a lot of times where you just... Like, Illusion would just walk... Like, Volamel mentioned that he would, like, wall ride into team fights and just always was dying first a lot of the time. And in a GOAT situation like that, losing your Lucio, that means you lose the speed boost, you lose sound barrier charge, which means that you can't just fall backwards at all. You can't engage, can't re-engage, disengage, and then they just run at you because they have the Lucio advantage now. So there were a lot of times where I was watching those fights and just Illusion would just die at the start of the fight, and at that point in a GOATs v GOATs meta, you basically lose that fight from there on.
Well, let's just talk though about a little bit something more positive. The showdowns were scheduled during this long Overwatch League break between stages 2 and 3 for a very specific reason, to showcase talent. And we have talked a bit about players who may not have risen to the occasion. But out of the Chinese teams, especially since a couple of the academy teams were not able to represent Chinese contenders at the showdown, we were a bit surprised that Billy didn't make it in, for example. Were there any individual players who you think could even be called up to OWL next season?
Oh, my boy Molly.
Yeah, Molly is really good.
Yeah.
I think people have definitely come around to accepting that he's one of the upper echelon flex supports in the region. When you look at Coldest, you see that fragging potential, you see that kind of that star player potential, but there are times that he just kind of gets run on, right?
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily his fault. That could be a team thing. It could be a positioning thing. That's not something that, I've spent enough time to figure out exactly why he's dying first a lot of the time. But Molly has a lot of that upside with not so much of that downside. He feels like a more consistent Coldest, a more flexible Coldest, and he's always been somebody that's been high on my mark. And I think he had a beautiful debut and coming into his own and showing people on LAN against some of the hardest competition in the world that he can sit and throw down with the best of them.
Yeah, I would echo Molly, definitely.
Yeah.
I think, go ahead, Vols.
I was just saying, Molly definitely another one of these players we can't really criticize from LGE. As bad as they may have seemed at times at Showdown, Molly definitely was performing, was popping off in that Zenyatta. Someone else that I think is a name to keep an eye on that we've already kind of mentioned is HUYA from LGE Gaming, that Lucio. Yeah. He can play a little bit aggressive sometimes, a Reddit Lucio, if you will. But at the same time, that's a double-edged sword, because while he does have a tendency to maybe overextend, maybe feed a little bit, a lot of the success LGD finds are because HUYA just finds a miracle boop out of nowhere, and it sets up a huge play, because you're not paying attention to the Lucio just wall riding across the moon until he's in your backline. And HUYA just has just a great efficiency, or whatever the word is. It's 3 a.m. My brain's not working, but he's really good at just pulling these plays out of thin air. And I feel like if you can rein him in a little bit, rein in some of his maybe too aggressive tendencies, HUYA is definitely a main support name to be watching out for in the future. Especially if you like that kind of. I feel like a good comparison would be IDK for the Spark. A very aggressive, very good playmaking Lucio, good mechanics. I feel like if you just give someone like HUYA a little bit more coaching, learn to rein him in so he can rein in a bit, definitely a name to watch in the future.
Yeah, so I echoed Molly and I echoed Vowels as well, and a kind of obvious one that you kind of can fall back on as well from VLG is Shy. I think Shy, give him a year or two. I know he's 16 right now, I believe, so he's got a little bit of time left in him, and there's a lot of actually Chinese players that if age restriction wasn't a thing, I think we could have a very powerful Chinese team in Overwatch League right now with the players that are in contenders, and Leave as well, who isn't playing at the moment but possibly will at some point. But I think Shy is definitely a player that he is a star. He's a growing star. There's going to be a point in 2 years where we're going to be talking about him, as one of the top 5 players. I think probably in his like he's like a DPS. I think he's that good. And I think he's someone that definitely Billy needs to either keep, and if they want to make that swap between, they're going to go full Chinese, I think you either keep him or you can sell him for mega bucks, because I think he's one of the best players. He's the clutchest player in Chinese contenders, by my book, in my opinion. That he's done things at, end of fights where I just, he pulls a rabbit out of a hat. Just on Zarya. For instance, I think against LGE on one of the points, I think it was a 3v6 or something, and he just melts everyone with Zarya, and they win the fight. So I think Shy, as a player, I think is definitely someone to keep looking out for in the future.
And Billy Gaming is the academy team of the Spark. So kind of transitioning a little bit, Overwatch League came back this past weekend, and we had some great moments, and we had the Chengdu Hunters. It was a super cute walkout, though. That was the highlight of that game against the Valiant.
I want one of those hats so bad.
It was adorable, but and we did see the return of one of Vowels' favorite main tanks. But there was so much that went wrong against one of the worst teams in the entire Overwatch League.
Yeah, there are compositional choices that maybe seem a little bit wacky, to use the common word. That maybe a little bit off meta, catch you off guard, and then just putting Gary on Lucio.
Yeah,
that did not strike me as a great decision. Someone with very good Zen mechanics, I don't think positioning is a strong suit. And when you think of Lucio's, particularly in Goat's meta,
those mechanics don't transfer.
Those mechanics don't translate. It's positioning you really want to be looking at. And Gary never struck me as someone who would be particularly good at that kind of transition. That questions me a little bit. I am kind of wondering, maybe is there something happening behind the scenes with Hunters? Obviously, it's not our place to speculate, but pulling a Veltal, who I think is easily a top 10, maybe getting towards top 5 main support in the league, for putting Gary off-rolling on the Lucio, something's got to be up there. Maybe he just plays a bit better with Jichi Ren, but I don't know. I feel like as good as Jichi Ren is on Rhine, the GOAT package overall looks better with Among and a Veltal than Jichi Ren and Gary. I don't know.
I mean, it was shocking even to see Jiren just step in, right? Like,
he swam over and went on.
I'm on the record saying that I wasn't expecting him to play. This isn't a player that they've practiced with. Why would you? What? Why? Everything's
they just thought they'd win. Like that it would be easy.
I mean, it's weird because Guangzhou kind of beat them at their own game a little bit throughout that series when they played Guangzhou. Guangzhou was playing a little bit more DPS, and they were trying to. Chengdu was trying to use the Hammond against Sombra. Eileen, I think, played a very phenomenal Sombra, who is a Chinese player, so we kind of have that, but. I think Guangzhou was very... I think now we're at the point where Chengdu is a little bit more readable than they were at the start, because we have 2 stages of this happening, and they haven't really changed too much about their compositions. They played a little bit more goats, but it's mostly just Ameng's going to play hamster. Okay, what do? We put a Sombra in here, hack the ball, dive the ball. It's a 6v5 because the ball dies instantly. I think there's a lot of that read happening now on Chengdu, and... I think they need to make some switches, which I guess maybe that's why they're putting in Jichi Ren instead of Ameng.
I can't imagine that's maybe the play, though.
Maybe they're thinking like we want to get better at goats with Jichi Ren or something like that. But I like Vowels said, I think Ameng on Rhine is not too shabby. He didn't look great when I saw him.
Okay, let me just clarify. I don't think Ameng is an awful line, but it wasn't so much. I don't think Ameng is a comparable line to Jichi Ren as much as I think the gap between Jichi Ren and Ameng is smaller than the gap between a Veltal and Gary. I feel like if you're going for the Jichi Ren Gary comp, you're sacrificing more.
Yeah.
So it could be a lot of stress, right? Yeah. These players weren't necessarily signed up for just playing this, right? Ameng kind of filled in while Jichi Ren was out, and maybe he needs a little bit of a break. Yeah. I always expected Chengdu to come out with Coach Ray, cheese their way through a couple stages, squeak out some wins against the top teams, not be last, not be first, somewhere in the middle,
wild card
probably
maybe
towards the bottom. Right, exactly. They were always going to taper off. It's just a little surprising that this week felt like a much worse.
It was like a nosedive than like a steady decline.
Yeah.
And it doesn't get much brighter from here, because you're looking at 2 matches against the Fuel this stage. You've got the Titans, you've got Shock, you've got Dynasty. This was always going to be a hard stage for our Hunters, but if they aren't going to get matches this week 1, unless we see a dramatic improvement, this might be an 0-7 stage. Yeah. And that pains me to say. I know I'm maybe one of the biggest Hunters fans in the scene, but this could legitimately be an 0-7 stage for the Hunters if they can't figure out what's ailing them this week. If they can't change something dramatically for the better, it's not looking bright.
Yeah, and I think Gary is like the one thing where like if we see Gary come out on Lucio next week, then I think there's really there has to be something.
That's a red flag, right?
Yeah, it's like huge...
something's going wrong.
It's a white flag. They're gonna lose if they do that.
Like, Veltal is really good. We've seen it, like, consistently throughout this stage, throughout World Cup. Like, he really is a great Lucio player, and Vowels was talking about it. I think he's easily top 10 in terms of Lucios and main supports, and the fact that he's not playing and that you're putting a flex support in his position it's a bit scary at this point. And if it continues like that, then, I think there's got to be something wrong.
Coach Ray leads a wild ride, and part of me wants to get off.
We're at the part where you just go straight down. Hopefully, there's going to be like the part where you go like up again later.
That's the fun part. You never know. Next week they could come out with Gary playing D.Va, right? You just don't know. Ameng comes in, plays Soldier 76. I don't know, guys.
I mean, we know he's a good DPS, so
he's got a good tracer.
I think we can say what we do know, though, is that the Hangzhou Spark are definitely on an upward trend.
Yes.
Yeah.
We'll always have
Let's talk
Gushua.
about.
We'll always have
Let's
Gushua.
talk.
No
Let's
matter
talk about
what.
good Chinese teams. Gushua is popping off. Rhea, someone who's
Rhea's-
really
yeah.
stepped up in the last stage or so since we had a proper discussion about the Owl teams on this show. Rhea has improved dramatically. I don't think it was. I don't know. I feel like maybe I was a bit too harsh on him before. I don't think he was ever awful. But there's been a huge change in the Diva play. Gushue is looking more and more integrated into the roster. Crystal is looking really good when he comes in as well. The Spark are getting it together, and that's exciting.
It took them a bit, but
yeah,
got here.
we're starting to see why everyone was so high on the Spark in the first place.
Weirdly enough, when you just slap some Chinese players and Korean players together and make them speak English, it's kind of hard to get stuff to work, right?
Yeah. It takes a while.
I've always been a pretty big a fan of Rhea. I talk about the anecdotal evidence of him subbing in for Choi Hyobin once he left for X6, and the team didn't seem to miss a beat. When I evaluated him on Spark, I felt like the system was wrong. And yes, he was playing poorly, but I felt like it was all the pieces weren't firing exactly at the same time, right? The wheels weren't spinning. The left and the right wheel weren't talking to each other. They were spinning at different times, and the car just is doing donuts. And it's not just the engine's fault. It's not just one. It's everything. It's the whole system. And yes, he has improved. Like, the communication is obviously so much better from week one, stage one, where Gush is going this way and the other teams in Antarctica, it's much more refined. It's much cleaner, and they're beating teams like Philly, who have been that gatekeeper into the upper middle of the pack teams. You're seeing them kind of slump down. You're seeing Spark again on that upward trend. A lot of star player potential, and I think we're finally starting to see that.
And I think the thing that's also good about, or that they've done well since the first stage and the second stage, is they've found actually a lineup and a way to play that's good, that matches their style. They've no Smite, we haven't seen him in quite a while, so it's just going to be Gushua is going to be on that main tank, because we would see beforehand, like in stage one, they would swap out their lineup between, they'd put in Gushua. Crystal didn't play that much, but now he's coming back in, and they seem to have a very good lineup and roster that they're going to stick with, and they're going to say, okay, this is how we're going to play. We're going to play with these players, and that, I think, bodes well again for communication, right? If these, I think I saw it on Twitter where a lot of the meta right now is having a core of players that you play around instead of just flexing onto different specialist roles. So you have now for Hangzhou a very good core, a very solid core that now has a lot of better communication, since they've had this basically 6 months to practice with each other and talk with each other, communicate, learn English a little bit better. So again, I think we're at the point now where we're seeing Hangzhou being the team that everyone thought was going to be one of the best teams. Like, I think, what did Monty have him, like number 2 or 2 or 3?
Really high.
Very high.
Yeah. There's also been a lot of talk over the last few months that they were always playing that kind of level on scrims. It was just maybe jitters when you got on the last stage, and I feel like that's been a big part of it as well. Getting past the jitters, getting more comfortable playing with each other in a match setting has been a dramatic improvement for the Spark. And if they're going to keep improving at this rate, I'm really excited to see how they look at season's end. Are we talking about Spark as one of the top 5, top 4 teams come playoffs?
Dark horse.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's hard to say, but they're going to have an interesting stage schedule. I was just pulling it up, and next week they play against Vancouver and Washington. So you kind of get both sides of the spectrum
so you
coming
prep
in there.
You prep for the Vancouver game really hard, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Vancouver is going to be. I think Spark Vancouver is going to be a very interesting litmus test. I'm not out here claiming that Spark is going to be the first team to beat Titans in a regular season. I don't think even the most diehard Chinese fans are saying that. We've all been burned. But that's going to be a very interesting litmus test to see just how much Spark have actually improved.
Yeah. Like, if they play it close and they play it like Chengdu, Chengdu kind of surprised Vancouver in that first match, but like if they play it close, like a 3-2, I think is very good for Hangzhou. If they're able to take Vancouver to a map 5, even a 3-1, if you win that one map and you play it close, I think you can definitely take that as a feather in your cap and say, we've gotten towards a good point now as a team. We can continue to improve, and we've been up against one of the best, or one of, if not the best teams in the league, and we were able to, give them a few haymakers. So I think, again, if they are able to win that, like Vowels says, I think it's a really good, it's going to give us a very good
I think the key will be comparing it to the match we've already had between these two teams at the start of the last stage where the Titans won 4-0. So if Spark takes a map, that's already improvement. If they take 2, that's incredible. But that's going to be very interesting to go back and not just look at score, but go back and compare how the play actually looks in these two matches. I think that's going to be a great marker for where
now
the
we have
Spark
pro viewers, so we can watch every angle.
I think
I'm so excited.
I think it really depends on what Vancouver shows up. I think we're starting to really figure out that Vancouver is their own worst enemy, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're a team that doesn't take every team seriously. They don't take every match seriously. I don't know if you've seen them play map 4s when they're already up 3-0. They play some interesting stuff. Because they're allowed to, right? You put in Hureg, right? Like, well, he's EMP and nobody, right? Yeah. What's up with that? Huxall's on Genji and the Goats meta. I mean, God bless him, but, you know, maybe not the best pick in the world. So it depends on if Vancouver respects them. And I think they do. So I think Spark's probably good for 1. Maybe get a map, maybe get control. This is an improved Spark. But there still are some glaring weaknesses. Godspeed, God bless him. Old boy. Man cannot, his grabs, man, they're just not good. They're just not good. His bubbles have gotten better, but you know, he doesn't look comfortable on the Zarya, and it's very obvious. Everybody else seems to be getting their stuff together. He's that kind of a glaring problem child on the roster.
And Zarya is so important too, right?
Yeah. That's a lot of your damage.
Yeah.
And it's going to be a really difficult stage for them to even make playoffs, even though they are so strong. Like, just looking forward, after they face Vancouver, after they face Washington, all right, we'll say that's a win and a loss. The week after, they play Seoul and Dallas, who are around that same tier, who are around that same level, I would say, as Hangzhou. And then you have teams like Atlanta, who, yes, they perform well against New York Excel. They did great against San Francisco.
Did okay against Shock, Took a map off of Vancouver, I think.
But you would say, though, that, well, I would say at least that Hangzhou is at a higher level than Atlanta. And just because of strength of schedule, it's so frustrating for me to see these top tier teams.
Watching Baby Bay versus Godspeed is going to be quite the show. That'll be an interesting matchup. But as we kind of get closer to wrapping things up tonight, I know we sometimes have hot takes. I know sometimes we have predictions. But I think for now, it seems pretty clear where these Chinese teams in the Overwatch League are going. Would you say so?
I'm still kind of lost on Charge.
I don't know what that's like the one where
I don't know what to feel about them. Sometimes they look good,
and then they get.
I like Eileen. Eileen's good.
And
then they
get bopped.
I don't know. I don't know what they're doing. Seoul. This isn't a Korean podcast, but Seoul's a very interesting team right now. You know, I expect them to do very well this stage. You know, they seem to be utilizing a 12-man roster very well, and that's fantastic for them. They seem to have like this very in-depth game plan for each and every team, and they have a roster kind of tailor-made for each team, and that's some scary stuff. Is that actually the case, or did they just beat up on some weak teams with 2 different rosters and go, hey guys, look at us, we got a lot of people? So we'll see. I don't know. Guangzhou, I wasn't high on them in the beginning, and they're still kind of just like, I exist. Sometimes I play Doomfist. I don't know. Like, I don't have a good read on them, but they're good. Blizzard replay viewer. It's out now.
Yeah.
I will have a better view of them.
You will have so many views, all the views, every single view.
Here's a good way for us to end tonight. Which player do you want to spend the most time on that new replay viewer? That's Chinese. That's our only rule.
Okay, that's Chinese. Okay.
I don't know. Maybe
probably.
If I'm feeling good, probably Gusha. If I hate myself, only way.
Oh, Gary, if he plays Lucio
Gary.
again.
I want to see Gary Lucio, and like, is there merit there? Is there something that I didn't see during the match?
Is there a hint of light and hint of hope? This is actually a decent decision.
Yeah, I want to watch Gary in the viewer and then watch Aveltel in the viewer and
compare the two.
Wonder why. Wonder why.
Poor Gary, dude. He doesn't.
I feel like he's been getting so much hate tonight.
Gary also shaved his head. I don't like that. Gary had one of the best hairstyles.
You're actually completely right.
And
so
he went and shaved his head. I don't. Gary, what are you doing? What are you doing, buddy? Is everything okay?
I actually, if you actually want to see like I think good hamster play, if you get into a good port, where like watching Ameng is probably pretty fun. If he's playing against like a team that doesn't know how to deal with like a ball, just like watch him. The tech is pretty cool. Like he's got some nice stuff.
I do want to clarify. I do really like Gary. Pretty good flag support. Very entertaining to watch. But when he's back in Contenders China,
Gary carry.
Maybe a little bit aggressive at times, but we called him the Gary Carry for a reason. I just don't think. I just want to see him on flex support again. I don't want to see him on main support. That's where the
here's a question. Would you rather have Gary come in? Okay, I guess this is actually a really easy one. Would you rather have Gary come in for Kyo and Eveltel, or would you rather have this? And it's probably obviously.
I would rather them. If you're like 3-0 up, I'd rather you put in Gary over Kyo so he's getting reps on flex support rather than whatever abomination this is. Let the man play his actual role.
Yeah.
I have to say, Jachirin is the one who I'm definitely going to be watching. I of course am not an owl level Reinhardt, but gosh, I identify so much with that play style. It's a problem.
Just tap that.
We knew it was coming. We knew it was coming.
And it was glorious, and it was beautiful.
Watching everyone watching everyone experience that for themselves for the first time, like on Twitter, when everyone is just like, Jichiren just doesn't stop hitting shift, and it's hilarious. It was great.
I mean, when he got announced that his visa was approved, I put out some tweets saying, "I hope you guys like Reinhardt charges." And I'm pretty sure I've retweeted that 4 times this week. Just told you.
He does right. He likes Reinhardt charges.
Well, it's like almost 3:15 in the morning for you, Vowels, and Volamel is about to charge right into bed. So I think for now,
Guangzhou charge.
That wasn't even. Oh, that was cute. That wasn't even on purpose. So I think for now. Oh, Vowels.
He's getting.
I think
Volam's gonna swan dive into his bed.
Good riddance, Vowels. But honestly, though, thank you all again for joining us for China Talk. I know we commiserated a little bit, but we're hopefully going to have dreams of happier Hangzhou Spark in playoffs. And there's a lot to learn as we keep going into Owls. So please come back next time. We hope to see you there. And good night and good luck.